Let's all celebrate. This year we celebrate 150 our jubilee. This year.
Good evening again. Minjani ka boti msasekini ka?
Ipfukile n'wina minjhani a khensa swinene.
Na hi pfukile i mani vito?
Vito i Phumudza Simangwe kusuka a Giyani Presbytery, the winning Presbytery.
Oh, another winning presbytery. Okay, I cancer. So mi nga hi byela hi outfit ya n'wina phela ya na swi vona ku ri hayi lapi ri petsiwile strong.
Yeah, no outfit leyi ya mina ni yi chuzini ma yi vona.
Yeah.
It's on point. Yeah, so I'm inspired by Bro Taylor success. He's behind this good Lishila.
Okay, Hakenza. So as we are celebrating 150 years eka EPCSA, as muntshwa wa EPCSA, hi swihi leswi mi swi langutelaka, not particularly ka siku ra namuntlha mara hi ku cinca loku mi ku langutelaka ku va kona mo especially loku nga ta accommodate hina vantshwa?
No, not necessarily ku cinca per se, but for the church to continue touching people's lives. We have witnessed, we're at 14C Agiani when we're celebrating a presbytery jubilee. We touched so many lives, so I'm hoping that the church will continue touching so many lives out there.
Inkomo ikhensile mi va na madambu lamanene. Mi swi twile ma swi sala mo saseka ka vanhu lava hi khe hi va interviewer. You've heard their opinions, you've heard how glad they are today, the brilliant ideas hi timhaka to kereke ya hina yi nga endlisa ku yini ku kula na ti-encouragements ta hina vantshwa ku ri hi nga swi endlisa ku yini ku va hi tikuma we spend another 150 years ha ha ri kona la kerekeni ya hina. Eka nkarhi wa sweswiwani hi ri khani mamba until we talk again.
Saturday, but to my come my brother fast. My kumula man. That rebella, the Kubasika Baku Shell, hello, but so okay. Have a chance to call me on the phone. You don't come around to see me in the week. You don't have a chance to call me on the phone. Yeah. What is that? Friday night is I know. I know. Waiting for you, just waiting for you. What's that? Friday night, I know I must be ready for you, just waiting for you. I don't want to be real. On your weekend special. On your weekend special. I love weekend special. On your weekend special. Weekend special. I know weekend special.
Thank you, program directors, for affording me this opportunity to come and do my assignment for this evening. Before I start with my assignment, allow me to greet the management of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, the Right Reverend J.S. Moyane and your entourage, the past moderators, ministers' wives, Hosi Wemintwa Wabumbiri, the regional secretary of the Norman Mashabani region, Mrs. Maswanganyi, nominees of the Moderator Special Award, I'll be failing my task if I cannot acknowledge the giants, the JPC. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Indeed, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce the guest of honor. We are truly honored by his presence tonight. And we're thrilled to have him share the momentous occasion with us. I'm now introducing the Vice Chancellor and the Principal of Tzaneen University of Technology. Previously, he has been the Deputy Executive Dean, Faculty of Humanities, UNISA, the Executive Dean, Faculty of Theology, UNISA, the Executive Director for Research, UNISA, the Deputy Registrar, UNISA, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Internalization, Advancement and Student Affairs, UJ. Strategic Advisor to the Vice Chancellor, University of Pretoria. Until 2024, he was a B1 National Research Foundation rated researcher, which means this in his peers consider him to be an international acclaimed researcher. In terms of the number, quality and impact of his research outputs, as well as the quality of master's and PhD students whom he has supervised to completion. In 2022, President Ramaphosa appointed him as the Deputy Chairperson of the South African National Planning Commission. He is also the Vice Chairperson of the MTN Foundation Board. He is an elected member of the apex body scientist in South Africa, namely the Academy of Science of South Africa, which means that his peers, according to various scientists' field, recognize him as a proven, solid, and leading scientist in his area of expertise, namely theology. Last week, the President Ramaphosa named a member of the National Dialogue Eminent Persons Group, amongst several other South Africans of great stature. Over the years, he has been a visiting professor at various universities: Hamburg University, Germany, University of Vienna, Austria, University of Nairobi, Kenya, Calvin University in USA, University of Helsinki, Finland, University of Lund, Sweden, University of Lausanne, Switzerland, and University of Mainz, Germany, as well as more than 150 peer-reviewed publications. He has recently published his memoir, Faces and Faces of Resilience, a memory of a special kind. He is one of the country's foremost science and education advocates, regularly disseminating his research through opinion pieces in various mainstream media platforms. Who is this special caliber? Mungwenati Mushazi Modi Wabango. Let us give Prof. Tinyiko Maluleke a round of applause. Prof, the time is yours.
Hello guys, itlanglan kuna. Nile Karibu celebrate 150 years ya EPCSA itsoko nanzika.
Thank you very much. I'm suffering from a bit of a cold, so I'll try not to do my usual stuff of dancing and singing, just to make sure that I preserve my voice. Ningon sungula ku cancer moderator Mfundisi Gigs Moyane. I don't think Ishu Wundla that he is my friend. It's obvious. And I really thank God for the many years we have known each other. From the time when we were young, handsome men, but you are still handsome. I don't know how you do it. I thank God for the manner in which you and your team, together with the General Secretary, the Deputy Moderator, and your executive, are leading our church at a time such as this. We thank God. I also wish to acknowledge, I won't do the protocol proper, but I always say to Dr. Dabezita Oswamintwa that when I grow up, I want to be like her. And for me, it's an honor that she is here in our presence today. There are only two eminent persons in this hall, myself and Dr. Nwamintwa. When you address us, you must say, Your Eminences. Loko armina hambileswi va nga ni tivisa hi marito ya ku saseka swinene. Ntiyiso hileswaku ni fana na xo xivungu a ni munhu wa nchumu. Ndi lowa ku hlekiwa ni ku soriwa. Ndi lamulele hi kereke leyi. Ku za mi ni vona ni te tani. Ni ponisiwe hi Yesu loko mi ni vona ni te tani. Kutani ni tsunisa Xikwembu hi tindlela hinkwato leti ni ti kotaka evuton'wini bya mina. If I were to speak as briefly as possible today, I would speak on the topic of returning to the source. Returning to the source. It's not original to me, the idea of returning to the source. It's an idea that comes from Amilcar Cabral, who wrote a book many years ago and suggested that unless and until you return to your source, you are likely to run out of steam and you are likely to get lost. The idea is not his only, because Amos Césaire came with the same kind of idea, but he came at it like this. For him, it was what he called un retour au pays natal, the return to your country of birth. Each one of us has a country of birth, not just South Africa, but that country of birth which is home to your soul. And both of them suggest that if you don't return to that country of birth, that original source, you will run into trouble. And so I wish to invite you to come with me on a series of short-lived journeys of memory, journeys of imagination, reimagination, micro-histories, voyages of discovery and recovery, expeditions of reconnaissance across the length and breadth of the country cities, towns, townships, and villages, which we call home. On this day, as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, I'd like to invite you to remember the pinnacle and the halo of May 1994. I also wish to invite you to ponder over the rock bottom low of May 2024, a bottom out of which we are still struggling to emerge. And here we are today. We are a country in need of a new vision, a new plan, a new way, and perhaps even a new name. Come, let us reminisce about the EPCSA before the EPCSA was the EPCSA. Come, let us paint pictures of South Africa before, during, and after colonialism and apartheid. But our conversations about the EPCSA may not be conducted behind closed doors. In all its former permutations and in all its present guises and sub-guises, the EPCSA has never existed in isolation. This, despite the many failed attempts to make the EPCSA wholly or partially isolated. What were the mission stations about if they were not also intended to create geographical and spiritual colonies cut off from the rest of society? What purpose did the strict separation between Majagani and the Christians serve, if not to buttress the physical, geographical, and spiritual structures of the colony? Now, as a professor, I am allowed Kubana Buntraga. And this is how the founding missionaries put it. Notre idée, monsieur, serait que l'on fonda une colonie où les prédicateurs missionnaires vers les ouvres secondés et soutenus par la piété et le travail d'artisans missionnaires. Cette forme de mission présente des avantages incontestables. Our idea, they said, will be that we go and find a colony and start a colony where the preaching missionaries do their work, supported by the piety and the work of artisan missionaries. And that this form of mission has a lot of advantages, they said. So they didn't just write a letter and say, we want to go to Africa to preach the gospel. They said, we want to go to Africa to start a colony. Any wonder why one of the very first acts of the missionaries when they landed, including in the Spelonken area, was to acquire land of their own? They did that within a week or two of their arrival. Right from conception, it was clearly understood that there would be preaching missionaries who would focus on their hearts and minds, as well as artisan missionaries who would focus on working the bodies of the people and working the land. Indeed, the very naming of the first station of La Mission Vaudoise into Valdesia, which is the Latin form of the name Vaux. So that's how Vaux becomes Valdesia, because in Latin, that's how it was rendered. I would want to argue that all of these was part of the effort to create a colony that stood out, a colony that stood apart, a colony that stood alone from its surrounding villages. And the formula was repeated everywhere else, at Tlangelani, at Shilubani, at Minga, and at other places. As per the Swiss missionary bulletin of 1927. It puts it like this: La Suisse ne possède pas de colonies au sens habituel. Nous n'avons pas contre une colonie spirituelle que les missionnaires sortis des milieux de nous ont fondé. In other words, we, the Swiss, do not have conventional colonies. What we have is a spiritual colony. You see, the aim of the Swiss was only to come and create a spiritual colony, not to acquire colonies like the Dutch, the English, the Portuguese, and the French, right? Maybe. Is it possible to create a colony that was only and purely spiritual with no material, economic, or social consequences? I doubt. But spiritual colonization, which was their declared aim, at least as far as that missionary bulletin I've just quoted was concerned, is also psychological colonization. It is also cultural alienation. It is so serious a matter that the inimitable Ngugi wa Thiong'o, may his soul rest in peace, he passed on just a month ago, who was formerly named as James Ngugi, wrote a whole book about spiritual and cultural colonization, and he titled it Decolonizing the Mind. And by the way, in French and all the other Romantic languages, the mind and the spirit is the same thing. They use the same word to refer to the mind and the spirit. Frantz Fanon wrote 2 books about the problem of spiritual colonization. The one book was The Wretched of the Earth. The other book was Black Skins, White Masks. Steve Biko wrote more than a dozen articles on the same subject. I'm trying to suggest that spiritual colonization is no small matter. It's something that we need to look at. But I started off with an invitation, and my invitation still stands. Come with me, briefly. Let us go and linger longer along the dirt roads and footpaths that zigzag across the villages and settlements of our motherland to test this theory that I've just put before you. Let us follow the myriad footprints, the hints, the allegations, the scents as in smell, and the sense as in money. And since genuine charity can only begin at home, we must commence our adventure in the Spelonken area. It is the month of August of the year 1873. Together, we shall summit the tallest point of the majestic Soutpansberg mountain. From there, we will regard the rolling landscapes of the Spelonken grasslands, punctuated by hills, valleys, thickets, forests, and villages scattered across the entire escarpment between Pisangskop in the south and the Soutpansberg in the north. Our gaze upon the broader area will reveal how the sprawling villages, some of which hung precariously on the side of cliffs and hills, were slowly being throttled by the encroaching fields of timber, citrus, and vegetable plantations belonging to white farmers. This process of throttling would later intensify as Pretorius and his fledgling Boer Republic continued to consolidate its power over the land and the peoples of the Transvaal. As well as the arrival of the missionaries, the discovery of diamond in Kimberley and gold in Johannesburg within the subsequent 2 decades was to complicate things further. It is August 1873. And I bid you come, so we together swim across the red and swollen Levubu River from north to south. Let us wade through the furious waters of the Levubu, infested with packs of man-eating crocodiles. If we make it across the river, we shall slowly ascend the steep hillock for 3 or 4 kilometers. Then we shall meet up with an approaching ox wagon, which had at least 12 black and white occupants. Though drawn by oxen, the wagon was propelled by the spirit of the European evangelical revival of the 19th century, all the way from Lausanne and Neuchâtel to the Spelonken area, later to Elim, later to Shilubane, to Minga, to Shihosane, and up to Ebilene Kamagudu in Mozambique. Indeed, the Swiss missionaries considered their grand march into the Spelonken area in 1873 as, and I quote very briefly how they put it in French, la découverte d'un peuple, a discovery of a people. They surmised that they had discovered a people. But as Patrick Harris has warned, the Swiss missionary incursion into Africa was neither driven by mere charity nor sheer love. There was a lot in it for the Swiss and for Switzerland, psychologically, spiritually, and nationally at least. In my own book, to which the generous lady who introduced me referred, Faces and Phases of Resilience, I have a chapter titled Valdezia Writes Back. In that chapter, I impersonate the area named Valdezia by the Swiss missionaries, and I imagine and suggest what Valdezia might say about its experiences since the arrival of the missionaries. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, come, let us peep into the 4-row Oseva of the missionaries, which is sailing triumphantly into the Spelonken area in August 1873. And here are the dramatis personae. In the left-hand corner of the front row of the wagon, we have the inimitable, regal and tall Ntate Eliakim Mulapi Matlanyan, who hails from the village of Kulu in Mafiteng, Lesotho. Next to him sits his wife, Disile Mamruesi Matlanyan, wearing her trademark smile of confidence. In the second row of the Oseva is the imposing and unmissable figure of Murena Aser Sehahaban and his better half, the elegant Mem Masehahaban. In the third row sits 37-year-old Adolf Mabie, his wife Maria Adele Mabie ne Cazalis, and their 2 children, Louise Mabie and Maria Emilia Mabie. In the fourth row of the wagon, there sits the 24-year-old Ernest Crow and his wife Matilda N. Crow, with whom he was to later have 6 children, as well as Paul Bertou, at that time only 22 years old, and his wife Eugenie Bertou, with whom he later had 3 children, all of whom, including the wife Eugenie, died by 1880. So that Paul Bertou became a widower within less than a decade after arriving in Valdezia. They succumbed to malaria, all of them. But lo and behold, leading the missionary wagon from the front was a galloping horse One of the most feared men in the area, Joao Albacini, was riding the horse with a long gun dangling on his side. Arthur Grandin describes Albacini in this way. He says, and I won't read it in French, because you look like nice people, I'm not going to punish you with that. Arthur Grandin says about Joao Albacini that he was a person of mixed blood, Portuguese, who had established himself in that area since 1841. He was a well-known chief of one part of the population, indigenous population, and he received the missionaries very well, explaining to them the desire to see them establish a mission station in his neighborhood. Elsewhere, Albacini is described as le mystérieux chef blanc, the mysterious chief, a white chief rather. Having failed spectacularly to establish a mission among the Bapedi of Sekhukhune, the Basotho and Swiss missionaries arrived in the Spelonken area in 1873. They had been told of a tribe of missionary-less, newly arrived immigrants, the Magwamba, known far and wide for their large noses, who lived in the Spelonken area. The missionaries decided to try their luck with this tribe. It's not me who says they had large noses. I'm just repeating what I have been told. Nobniese, they called them. As well as inquiring with missionaries of the Dutch Reformed Church and the Lutheran Church who were working in adjacent areas in the greater region, the first port of call for the Basotho Swiss entourage of missionaries and evangelists was in fact the formidable fortress of Joao Albacini, located at the foot of the Rionde mountain. Because this man had many guns, a string of horses, and bands of militia, he had made himself chief, and he was also appointed a tax collecting commissioner by the Boer Republic. With Albacini's blessings, the missionaries would soon establish their mission upon a nondescript hillock further east on the southern banks of the Livubu River. They called it La Mission Vaudois. In subsequent years, the mission has been known as La Mission Romande, La Mission Suisse dans l'Afrique du Sud, Swiss Mission in South Africa, and Tonga Presbyterian Church until the early 80s, when the entity became the Evangelical Presbyterian Church in South Africa. The latter name was adopted at the insistence of those who were increasingly uncomfortable with the rather ethnic nature of the name Tonga Presbyterian Church. The name especially irked the new crop of ministers who were influenced by the Black consciousness teachings of Steve Biko at FETSEM in Alice, as well as being modeled on the name of the EPCSA's historic sister church in Lesotho, because that church in Lesotho was already being called the Lesotho Evangelical Church in Southern Africa. So it made sense to talk about the Evangelical Presbyterian Church in South Africa. The new name, EPCSA, was also a compromise, following the spectacular failure to unite several Presbyterian churches in South Africa. When Francois Bill wrote his thesis in 1965 on the church, he ends his book very hopefully, thinking that the Presbyterian churches were about to unite, and they failed to unite. So it was consolation prize to become the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, having failed to become one big Presbyterian Church of South Africa, white and black. Elsewhere, I have argued in favor of the year 1873 being more significant in the story of the genesis of the EPCSA than the year 1875. Mitan Komela moderator. Most teka leswaku leyi me hari ya xidyondzeki. The choice of 1873 over 1875 is as much a matter of fidelity to historical truth, if you define it narrowly, but also a matter of historical justice, broadly defined. It is also a matter of faithfulness to fact and a matter of faithfulness to principle. I am not the first person to make that suggestion. Se mengakwati kukubula mengwana mamail. Baburile bangwanyan for many years before. In fact, 50 years ago, in 1975, the commemorative booklet published on occasion of the centennial jubilee of the then Tsonga Presbyterian Church, held in Valdesia and edited by Reverend Theo Schneider, begins with these wishy-washy but nevertheless telling words, and I quote, "All history is biased. It is written from a certain point of view so as to explain certain facts. It is therefore understandable that institutional histories have all presented Ernest Crowe and Paul Bertou as the pioneers of the gospel among the Tsonga people. This, however, is not strictly correct. The full story is that on their first exploratory journey from Lesotho to the Northern Transvaal in 1873, Adolphe Mabie and Paul Bertou were accompanied by a retinue of Basotho. Of these, some evangelists stayed behind to start the work of evangelization when the white missionaries returned to Lesotho. And so on, says Theo Schneider. Why does he say it's not strictly correct? As if there is a chance that it could be incorrect to suggest that the Basothos stayed behind. Similarly, to say that all history is biased and therefore we should understand this. We shouldn't understand what is not historically factual. We shouldn't be encouraged to do that. And so, let's not belabor this point, but I would like to exhort the church in Martin Luther King Jr. style and in his voice by saying, if we cannot fly to 1783, let us run towards 1783. If we cannot run towards 1873, let us walk to 1873. If we cannot walk to 1873, let us crawl to 1873. If we cannot crawl, let us roll our fat, slim, short, and tall bodies forward towards 1873, inch by inch, day by day. But whatever we do, we must never stop moving forward to 1873. Because to move forward to 1873 is to embrace and to valorize the agency of indigenous evangelists, missionaries, elders, and local Christians. Indeed, to embrace 1873 is to acknowledge and to affirm ourselves, all of us, men, women, children, the Swiss, the Basotho, the Batsonga, l'Église Libre du Canton Vaud, the Church of Lesotho, and the EPCSA. Unless we appreciate our own contributions, albeit imperfect contributions, we deny our own selves the right, the means, and the permission to dare take the EPCSA to the next level. You can't take to the next level something that is not yours, something that was merely given to you. We must go forward to 1873, not merely to stop participating in the erasure of African contributions, but also so that we may bid farewell to our historiographical and missiological innocence. Contrary to the Theo Schneider quote that I just shared above, there is indeed nothing understandable about the exclusive obsession with Crow and Bertu. Exclusive is the key word. Of course, Crow and Bertu had a huge role to play. But while Crow and Bertu may have come for an exploratory weekend away in August 1873, Matlanyane and Skakhabane put their hearts and souls into it, and they stayed behind, which is how you have Lydia Shihlomulo. They converted her, and not Crow or Bertu. And so, we stay a little longer with the year 1873 as a means of returning to our place of birth, our country of birth. As stated earlier, our conversations about the EPCSA may not be conducted behind closed doors, for the EPCSA has never existed behind closed doors. Consider this. In 1873, it was more than 200 years since the first black woman, Eva Krotoa, a Khoikhoi of the Gorigai Kona tribe, was baptized as a Christian, and that was in the year 1662. And this was after 11-year-old Eva Krotoa was taken into the home of Jan van Riebeck to work as a domestic. It is probably more accurate to call her a child laborer. After all, the evangelization of indigenous people was the last thing on the minds of the Dutch settlers. You know, it took them more than 100 years to start mission work after they had settled in the Cape. And is it any wonder that Krotoa, the first woman, the first African to be baptized, also became the first black person to be incarcerated in Robben Island, where she also died an alcoholic at the age of 32. That was after even trying to join them by marrying a white man. In 1873, it was 136 years since George Smith, the European missionary ever to evangelize indigenous people in South Africa, started his work at Genadendal, which was formerly known as Bavianskloof. In the year 1873, Nzikana, the great prophet and one of the first Christians among the Amaxhosa, had been dead for 38 years. He who composed one of the greatest African crossover hymns ever written, Ulothixo Omkhulu. Uye olikaka, ikaka lamakaka. Nzikana's great hymn, it's sometimes called. Nzikana was also very influential on John Knox Bokwe. And you can come with me to visit the humble abode of the then 18-year-old John Knox Bokwe. He was 18 in 1873. John Knox Bokwe was later to compose, among many other songs, one of the most evocative, the most Pan-Africanist, and the most missionary-charged songs of the 19th century South Africa. He named it A Plea for Africa. In the year of 1873, please walk with me to the town of Uitenhage, where and when a baby boy was born to the Sontongas, and they named him Enoch. What a biblical name. The Enoch Sontonga, who gifted us the Nkosi Sikelel Africa, the 128 years old song that has become the national anthem of most, if not all, of Southern Africa. It is 1873, and please accompany me to Tentani in the Eastern Cape. Come, let us stand together in reverence at the graveside, very fresh grave of the son of Nosutu, one Reverend Tio Soga. He died of tuberculosis in 1871, while the Swiss and Basotho missionaries were still at Sekhukhune. He was only 42 years old. He who was the first black person to be ordained a priest among the Protestant churches of Southern Africa. When he returned from theological school in Glasgow, Scotland, with his white wife, he found the country alight, the country in pain, and full of the smell of dead cattle and human beings because of isihelegu sikanongqawusi. This prompted him to compose the famous and well-loved hymn, Lizalisi idinga lakho, Thixo Nkosi yenyaniso, the same song that was sung when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission met for the first time. Yes, it is 1873. In 1873, Pixley Isaka Seme, founder of the ANC, if Bongani Ngulunga is to be believed, because that's the title of his book, he would only be born 8 years later in 1881. Pixley Isaka Seme, he whose April 1906 Columbia University speech titled The Regeneration of Africa was probably the inspiration for Thabo Mbeki's sublime classic, I Am an African. Because Pixley Isaka Seme's speech begins with the words, I am an African, and I set my pride in my race over and against a hostile public opinion. And that I am an African of Pixley Kaseme is what you find in Thabo Mbeki's I Am an African speech. In 1873, if we went to Eden Vale in Pietermaritzburg, now known as KwaXaluza, we would have found that Ruben Tolakele Xaluza, the author of the fearless 1913 song titled Umthetho we-Land Act, Umthetho Omubi, was not yet born. He would only be born 22 years later on 14 November 1895. And by the way, that song, Umthetho we-Land Act, is in our hymn book, except that we have sanitized it, we have simplified it, we have misconstrued it, because instead of saying, Silusapolwa se Africa, sikhalela izwe lakithi, sikhala nge-Land Act, umthetho mubi, owawelela amanxusa. You know what we say? Kunanzi haka wonhlangano watimbi. It's got nothing at all to do with the land and the politics of the time. That was Ruben Tolakele Xaluza. And if we were to take a short left to the Ramokgopa village outside Soekmekar in 1873, there we would behold a 2-year-old baby girl called Charlotte Manya Matleke, wrapped in swaddling clothes. She who would later become the first black woman to obtain a science degree, the only woman to attend the 1912 ANC conference as a delegate. There probably were other women cooking and making tea, but she was there as a delegate. It is 1873, and further north at the Valdezia Mission Station, Daniel Cornell Marivati, pioneering singer, the first recorded Xitsonga musician, the founder of Xitsonga disco, if you like, a musical virtuoso, teacher and pioneer author. He was not yet born. He would only be born 24 years later on 18th February 1897. In fact, the year 1873 was 45 years before the birth of Nelson Mandela and 51 years before the birth of Robert Sobukwe. But here's the thing. In 1873, there were 2 starry-eyed 9-year-old boys of particular interest. The one was called Madzibi Mapope, who, together with his brother, used to run along the winding and steep footpath of a sprawling village at the foot of the Soutpansberg Mountains. The other 9-year-old of interest in 1873 was Shikuna Shilubang, who later got the name Masungi when he returned from the mountain. Masungi had a meticulously curated, carefully guided, deftly disguised, and maximally protected upbringing in the Shilubani royal house beneath the Roboni mountain, because Masungi was earmarked for chieftaincy, which he later ascended a few years later after the death of his father. Around age 13, Madzibi Mapope and his brother, probably his name is Shihosi, because the Swiss mess up these names. They write Shihosi, Chihosi, was taken into the Paul Bertu household and the crew household as domestics, as gardeners, and as gophers. Together with his brother, they were not mere workers for the missionaries, but they were being mentored into a Christian life. Madzibi by the Bertus and Shihosi by the Crows. Later, they were each given Christian names. The one became Calvin Mapope, and the other became Jonas Mapope. As fortune would have it, the two brothers, together with Samuel Malale, were the first local ministers to be ordained. It is a piece of backhanded irony that D.C. Marivate, to whom we have referred above, was to pen a song around 1950, which was sung while we were standing outside today, titled Mahungu Lamanen, in which he does to the Swiss what the Swiss repeatedly did to the locals. Why do I say that? In that song, Marivate mentions the names of Malale and Mapope brothers, but leaves Crow and Bertu unnamed, even though he references them. You know, one of the most frustrating things about reading Swiss history is that many black people are unnamed. Sometimes you have a beautiful picture of black people who are priests and so on, and then underneath you just find a text that says, "Le pasteur indigène." Black pastors. No names, they don't tell you who and who. But both the 9-year-olds of 1873, Masungi and Madzibi, have other interesting encounters with Swiss missionaries. In 1899, in the presence of Juno, and by Juno, Hosi Mhlaba was baptized. But when Juno used a moment of prayer to put too much undue pressure on Hosi Mhlaba to make a clean cut with his life before baptism, the chief later retorted by saying, "I am like a morula tree between two fields. I belong to both sides. I cannot choose the one over the other." You know how people use prayer sometimes. They say, "Let us pray." And they say, so Juno tried that trick on Hosi Mhlaba, and it did not work. Similarly, after one of Chief Mhlaba's subjects, Nwamdzina, had given Jafro Thomas a hard smack in the face for kidnapping her son and preventing him to go to circumcision school, the missionaries and the local white commissioners threatened to get Nwamdzina arrested for assaulting a white woman, which was a big crime at that time. Chief Mhlaba entered the fray and ruled in favor of Nwamdzina, saying, end of the matter. A few years later, Hosi Mhlaba directed a letter to the missionaries informing them that, "I wish you to know that I'm about to marry yet another wife, like my father before me." So he continued to do those things. Back to Madzibi Mapope, very briefly. Imagine a hall full of white people in Lausanne, Switzerland, full of ambassadors, full of missionary leaders from all over Europe, because 1925 is the 50th Jubilee. We're having the 150th today. So they take Mazibi Mapope to Switzerland as part and part of their celebrations of the 50 years of Jubilee. In fact, the book that tells that story is called 5 ans après, 50 years after. And on the face of that book, on the book cover, is the face of Mazibi Mapope. So he stands there in April 1925 and he gives a speech. He titles his speech, Huaya Macedonia, the call of Macedonia. And he talks about what we need in Africa and the help we need. But as he reflects upon that occasion, in his own biography, Tabutomi Bzamina, he says, "Nzititwa ndifana na nongani lenga wela emasini." As I stood there, looking at all these white people, I felt like a fly that had fallen into a bowl of milk. Why would he feel like that? There's a famous picture of him standing next to Juno, or rather, yes, Juno. Both of them are wearing bow ties. Both of them are wearing black suits. They look both very civilized. In fact, Mazibi looks more civilized than Juno. And yet, he felt like a fly in the milk when he was speaking in that hall at Lausanne. One of the things that happened to him when he was in Switzerland in 1925 is that Juno took him to some scientist, anthropologist, eugenicist, who measured his ears, measured his head, measured his eyes, and after doing all these measurements, and he probably had to be stripped to be measured. They don't say that, but he tells the story himself. And after he was measured all around and all over, the scientist said, "Yes, he is a true African." No wonder, as he stood there, he felt like a fly in a bowl of milk. Some of the challenges ahead before I stop, moderator and deputy moderator. We as a church need to return to the source. Hi fanele ku tlhelela enthabeleni. By this I mean we need to return to the source of who we truly are. And who we truly are encompasses the input of the Basotho, the input of the Swiss, and the input of many local evangelists and translators. You know, when Matlanyane and Sahaban remained in Valdezia, what did they do? They taught, they translated, and they converted people, which is at the heart of what mission is all about. You can't be a church in mission if you are not doing some, if not all of that and more. Returning to the source means returning to the original vision of Crow and Bertu. What did they say in their letter, the 1869 letter to the Église Libre de Canton Vaud? They said, "Monsieur, le champ, c'est le monde. Our mission field is the world." That's how wide and how ambitious their vision is. They were not thinking about converting the old lady next door. They wanted to save the world, to change the world. I am not so sure that we still have that bold and wide vision that our church started on. Notre champ, c'est le monde. The world is our mission field. What does it mean to return to the source? It means to return to God. When, as the church, we dry up like a river. When young people vote with their feet and move out, as many come to take rather than give in the church, as the church looks inwards and only after itself, as the church wishes simply to look at itself in the mirror. You know that big party that King Ahasuerus had in the book of Esther, the week-long party. You know what that party was all about? It was him looking at himself in the mirror. He was celebrating himself. It was all about him. He said, come, all of you, to celebrate me for 1 week. We can't do that. We can't just, as a church, spend time in front of the mirror. We should spend more time in the window and more time in the field, because the world is our mission field. Our source is the Bible, unlike Amilcar Cabral, whose source was culture. Unlike Aimé Césaire, whose source was merely what he called the country of origin. We go to the original source, which is the Bible. The second very important source, and by the Bible, by the way, if I had time, I would problematize this a little bit more, because you know, there are far too many people who go around and say, Liti iBhayibheli. They start like that. But when you listen carefully, they are not talking about the Bible. They are talking about themselves and things that they imagine. So there is that danger. We can talk about it another day. The other source to which we must return is the Missio Dei, the mission of God. You see, there are two types of mission. That is the mission of God and the missions of the churches and missionary societies. The latter are the results and the effects of the Missio Dei, not the original. And they must not be confused. You see, Esther was confusing the Missio Dei, or rather was in danger of confusing the Missio Dei and the missions of the people and the missions of the world. Every company has a mission nowadays. And so Mordecai reminded her and said, listen, if you do not step up to take your place and to do the mission for which you have been created and brought here, you must know that God has other plans. Remember the words of Mark Twain. There are two very important days in the life of a human being. The day you are born and the day you find out why. Some people never find out why they are born. They die wondering why they were born. Mordecai is saying to Esther, find out why you were born. This is your moment to find out why you were born. This is the moment when your mission aligns with the Missio Dei. To return to the source is to find that alignment between all these little missions we have in the church and the Missio Dei. I've already referred to the Bible, but also history is a source to which we need to return. We can't trivialize historical erasure. If we trivialize the historical erasure, we ourselves will be erased from history 50 years, 70 years, 80 years from now. And our erasure from history means that we did not step up to do what we had to do at the time we had to do it, like Esther is in danger of. I had a reference to the church in the 21st century in the book that is coming out, and I smiled. Because in this 21st century, we need to think about AI, 4IR. And AI, good and bad, actually more bad than good. Because where do you see AI shining nowadays? You see it in Ukraine. You see it in Gaza with this precision bombing. Is that really what AI was created for? Why is it that AI is not there in the Eastern Cape when people are drowning? And who's going to talk about that? You can't expect Elon Musk to build AI that will behave better than Elon Musk. Elon Musk will build AI that is going to be greedy, that is going to be looking for money, that is going to be wreaking havoc, because he is Elon Musk. So what are we going to do about it? What can the church do about it? We talk about bringing up children. We have new children in our midst. They are called AI. And they are being taught to misbehave more than they are being taught to behave. They are being taught to do violence more than they are being taught to do peace. They are not there in Sudan. They are not there. If they are there to kill these children that we now have. We have to build a church that is sensitive to environmental justice. For God so loved the world that God gave his begotten Son. God so loved the world. God did not so love the people alone. God did not so love the white people alone, the Tsonga people, the Sotho people. God so loved the world. And what does that mean? It means God loves frogs and snakes and mountains and lakes and rivers and seas. We have a responsibility as a church to ask ourselves, what is our role in this war for environmental justice? At this time, when the temperatures are going high. I've just come back from Paris now. Paris was like Palaburwa. It was in the 40s. You can see that there is climate change. Look at the floods in KwaZulu-Natal. That is climate change. It's not out there, it's in here. And what will the EPCSA be doing about that? One of the stories I tell in my own book is about how I arrived at FETSEM. And for the first time in my educational life, and I'm concluding, I was given an assignment that started with the question, what do you think? No one had ever asked me what I think up until that time. At school, I was only asked, what do you remember? Do you remember when Jan van Riebeeck arrived? Do you remember the name of the ship in which Jan van Riebeeck was? And I would give it back and pass. Then I arrive at FETSEM and I'm asked, what do you think? Me? Does it matter what I think? Little me? Just tell me what you want me to tell you and to remember. And they said, no, go and tell us what you think. In the 21st century, we need to rethink theological education and train our ministers better. We need an online FETSEM. It is possible to have it online. We need to be in the forefront of the change in the future of work, the change that we ourselves are experiencing at this time. Moderator, before I stop, and I'm stopping now, I saw how you wished to be given a book by the team that has written a book which is coming. My book is ready. I want to give it to you now. You can come and receive it. Thanks. It's an excuse to get a picture with you. I didn't know how to approach you and ask for a picture. So, but if we hold this book, I've already signed it. It's called Faces and Phases of Resilience. It's my story, but it's also the story of many other people. It is available at Exclusive Books if you want to know a little bit more of my secrets. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, nikarwapo ikuma a message of support kusuka eka Northern Mashabani region laha mahungu lama ya nga tata kusuka eka regional secretary of the ANC manana Sonia Ngoveni Maswanganyi loko va ha taleni Pastor Rudolph Mabasa va ta va tlakusa kombela mabela mavoko.
Nima inkweli kale saben. Mikona lamprile. Mikulungwani kona ndaule. Mikulungwani ya celebrate. Hallelujah. Glory be to Jesus.
It's so beautiful to speak in an environment like this one. It is also beautiful to come and celebrate with the church that has raised me. To the program director, Valanza, and the other program directors, ni kombela kuteka nkarhi lowu ni xixima Her Royal Highness Hosi Nwamitwa Maniha Mishishima. To the moderator, D.S. Moyani, the General Secretary, Reverend T.D.Y. Sombani, to the host, Reverend Njaro, we are humbled to be part of such special occasion. To to the leadership of the EPCSA from various parishes. Professor Malule, thank you so much for taking us through the memory line. I have noted and I want to appreciate the presence of a PEC member of Gauteng province, Comrade Dr. Onas Mukari. I'm sure Tatatana Mukari. And to all the guests and the leaders that I might have not noticed. When I was introduced, it was indicated that the REC officials in this region today have honored the funeral of the former president of the African National Congress, the former president of the country, Comrade Didi, in Mpumalanga. That is why I am alone from the officials, but they are sending their regards. To indicate this evening as I come to give a message of support that this church has contributed to who I am today. I have led at a very young age at Sunday school and youth in different structures, from the church in the village where I'm coming from. For those who don't know, I come from this community in a small village called Jopi. I want to highlight that this is my childhood church. My parents and my family in general remain devoted members of this church. Program director, let me take out this opportunity and point out the significant role that this church has played in education and health, tracing back to its origin as the professor was presenting in 1875 when Swiss mission arrived in the present-day Limpopo province, South Africa. Here are some of the key contributions that we want to share with you as we bring forth this message of support. That in the education sector, the church founded institutions like your Lemana College and Lemana Secondary School, which were attended by the legendary Mozambican freedom fighter, Eduardo Mondlane. The church's education system was based on biblical teachings, aiming to prepare candidates for baptism and confirmations, ultimately making them full members of the church. In the health sector, the EPCSA established hospitals like Ilim and Shilubani. They provided crucial healthcare services to local communities. The church actively contributed to the fight against HIV and AIDS, caring for the sick and supporting families affected by the pandemic. The hospitals and clinics established by this church provided primary health services to rural and underserved communities. Today, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church of South Africa continues to prioritize education and health, aligning with its mission to foster spiritual and serve humanity. The church's commitment to the social development is evident in its outreach programs, volunteer opportunities, and initiatives addressing social justice issues. The initiatives aims to uplift communities and foster social cohesion. Partnering with government. This church works closely with the government to address societal challenges, including poverty, inequality, and social injustice. By partnering with the government, the church amplifies its impact on education and community development. Overall, this church has played a vital role in promoting education and community development, reflecting a commitment to serving both God and humanity. The church's approach to education and healthcare emphasizes the importance of spiritual care and support, recognizing the interconnectedness of physical and spiritual well-being. Program directors, the fact that the church in general and this church in particular have played an important role in the struggle against apartheid. The church spoke out against the injustice of apartheid, using the pulpit to denounce the system's cruelty and injustice. Church leaders and organizations advocated for justice, equality, and human rights, often in the face of government repression. Some churches provided safe havens for anti-apartheid activists, offering shelter and protection from government persecution. Certain church leaders supported resistance movements, such as the ANC, and provided resources, networks, and moral support. As we celebrate the 150th of this church, we are mindful of the fact that churches and church-related organizations provided humanitarian aid to those affected by apartheid policies, including refugees, detainees, and their families. Churches documented human rights abuses, helping to raise awareness about the atrocities committed under apartheid. The struggle against apartheid fostered cooperation amongst different denominations, as well as with other faith-based communities. The global movement played a crucial role in mobilizing international pressure against the apartheid regime, including economic sanction and diplomatic isolation. Notable church leaders such as Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Bayers Nodi, Chief Albert Lutuli, just to mention a few, played a prominent role in the struggle against apartheid, using their positions to speak against injustice and mobilize support for the liberation movement. The church's role in the struggle for liberation in South Africa was complex and multifaceted, with some churches and individuals actively supporting the apartheid regime. However, many churches and church leaders played a significant role in advocating for justice, providing support to activists and documenting human rights abuses. Program directors, the church continues to play a significant role in South Africa, contributing to various aspects of society. The church should work to promote unity and reconciliation in the post-apartheid South Africa, encouraging dialogues and cooperation amongst different communities. The church should initiate economic empowerment programs such as job training and community development projects. The church should speak out on various social issues, including poverty, inequality, and corruption, providing moral guidance and advocating for justice. The church should speak out against gender-based violence and femicide. Jafro, you will note that in the past 2 weeks or so, we have experienced a terrible experience in this part of the region where a 1-month baby has been raped. The church should rise. The church should support victim empowerment programs, program directors. The Evangelical Presbyterian Church of South Africa's role in the new South Africa is multifaceted, and its contributions are valued by the African National Congress and by government at large. While challenges remain, the church continues to be a force for good, promoting unity, justice, and human rights. In conclusion, we want to encourage the church to continue to stand like what Mordecai said to Esther, that if you do not stand for such a times like this, help will come from somewhere else. And our hope as the African National Congress is that the help shall come from the Almighty God moderator. And this church stands in the gap of this country. And we want to wish this gala dinner, as it continues, Jafro, a great success and memorable experience. In the mention of the SG, he said this is a romance because the actual event is still coming. And we want to wish in advance the gala dinner that is going to be one of its own as we celebrate the 150 years of the existence of this church. I thank you, Program Director.
Kensi listening, kom lama bela maboko ba ya tamans. Kahle kahle leswi nilava ku sivula sweswo ni fanele mi rhumela SMS ni tshame hansi. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served. Ye friend love, kom la mi tshunela mtamta hi pimela ku hina vafundisi ya dyela kwihi.
Come on now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You look so beautiful tonight. Woo! Yeah. Pata pata, kugada tipega. Yo, pata pata, kugada tipega. Nancy, pata pata, kugada tipega. Yo, pata pata, yo mama, yo mama. Nancy, pata pata, yo mama, yo mama. Yo, pata pata, yo mama, yo mama. Nancy, pata pata, yo mama, yo mama. Every Friday night and Saturday night, pata pata on the dance. We'll dance all night long Pata